Okay, we are now doing, what are we doing? This is a great start. Yes, because nothing is quite as exciting as talking about the writing of poetry. Everybody better settle down. This is going to be riveting. Hi, my name is Todd Regoulinsky and I'm a writer, and my new book is called Okay, Okay, Okay. It is a book of poems, and the poems were inspired by people's last words. And I've said in my previous videos, this is a rather absurd notion, and I stand by that. But the only thing that's more absurd than the notion is the fact that it took me so long to write the book, and the fact that I had to reinvent my writing process in order to do that. So the normal way that I write poems, as I said in a previous video, my poems are very confessional. They're about me, my thoughts, my emotions, stuff going on in my head. And so the way I write is basically I sit down with my notebook, or I sit down at my laptop, and I just kind of go. I'll latch onto something in my head and I'll say, let's write about that. And I'll write until I figure it's done, and that's that. I set out in this project to do something different than how I had ever written before, because I wanted to see if I could write something that wasn't just about me. Now granted, the poems did end up containing me no matter what I did, but I feel like there's a lot less of me at the very front and center of these poems than there was in a lot of my other poems. The problem I had was all of the tricks that I had before this didn't work. Just sitting down to write just didn't work. And I found that just sitting down to write and focusing on these quotations became very arduous. It was very arduous work. And part of that is because, guess what? Focusing on people's last words before they shuffled off this mortal coil can be a bummer. So I would literally get depressed at a certain point, enough where I said, I can't write this anymore, and I'd set it aside. The idea would come back to me, it would be nagging at me, I'd say, all right, let me give it a try now, and then I would go through the same process. I'd write a little bit and then just be very depressed, have to stop. So eventually, after doing this 5 or 6 times, I wised up a little bit and said, well, it's got to be somewhat of the process. I've got to be doing something wrong in the process, because I've written plenty of poems in my life, and it's never been like this, so it must be the process. So I started thinking about how can I do this so that it's not as focused on the fact that these are people's last words, which sounds kind of funny when that's the entire gist of the book. However, what I realized is that my writing normally has always been a search for context, or trying to put myself or my thoughts or my feelings into some kind of context, whether that be a poem or whether it be making sense of the world around me and trying to fit everything into that world. What I needed to do here was remove context. So I was working in a very opposite way than I normally do. So what I would do is I had my list of quotations that I'd been collecting, and I had a stack of 3x5 index cards, and I would just write the words from the quotation on the 3x5 index card without any attribution. So the person's name is not on the card at all. And in fact, I didn't put quotation marks around the quote because I wanted to further establish somewhere in my head that this isn't something that somebody said. It's just a bunch of words. It's words that are random, like almost like if you had like the magnetic poetry kit in your refrigerator. It's just a bunch of random words that were plopped into this one area. And so what I found was, if I got about 15 to 25 cards, I then had my own deck of words. And I would shuffle through those, and I would literally just wait until something struck me on the cards. And sometimes I would go through the entire deck once and I'd be back at the start again. I'd just go through until something sparked in my mind. There would be some sort of, flicker of an idea, and then I would write. And what I found was this became incredibly freeing. I wasn't thinking about the fact that these are people's last words, that shortly thereafter they were no longer part of the living world. And it allowed me to write without the context of who they were. So I wasn't trying to write a poem about Teddy Roosevelt or Julius Caesar, whoever. There's two interesting people to go with. And so it freed me from that context to write just about the words. And I kind of would just repeat this process, and the deck would eventually slim down as I would put a big old check mark through a card and set it aside. And then I'd add some more cards in when the deck started getting really thin. And at a certain point, I just thought to myself, okay, I think I've got enough. This feels like enough poems. I wish I had a better measurement for that. I wish that there was some sort of number that I had in mind. I didn't. I got to a point where I felt this is enough. This is about all I have to say on this. And at that point, I entered into editing, which is a whole other thing because I am not the world's biggest fan of editing. I never have been. And so that was an entire other process. Maybe I'll talk about that in another video, but there's no need for me to harangue you about that. Suffice it to say, I went through this entire process going essentially between my deck of cards that was, ever shrinking and increasing, and a list of poems that I would kind of go back, or a list of quotations that I would reference against those cards. This was very confusing and convoluted, of course, and because of that, eagle-eyed readers will notice that there is actually one repeated quote in the book, and I'm not going to tell you what it was. You'll have to search through and find it yourself. It was not on purpose. This individual or that quote has no real special meaning to me. It just so happened to work out that way, and I honestly did not notice until I was putting the book into order and I was writing the index of poems and realized, oh, wait a minute, that one looks familiar. And I went back, oh, it is, because it's already in the book. Two completely different poems, same quote. So, it's a little scavenger hunt for you when you buy the book. Enjoy. So that's how I wrote these poems. It completely changed my writing approach, at least for this purpose. Now I know I have another tool in my bag if I ever decide to do another project kind of like this. It's not something I do now, of course. I've kind of gone back to my own process and write much the way that I used to. However, I do feel I have incorporated some of the essence of these poems into what I'm writing now, which is a very interesting thing. It's almost like when you come back from vacation and you still feels a little different walking around your house just because you've been living somewhere else for a little while. So thank you for watching. Definitely appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to have at least one more video, probably two, because I might talk about the editing. That's an interesting topic in and of itself. But I do want to talk about where the title came from, Okay, 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 and why that's even significant or why it ended up being the title of the book. So thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and if you'd like a copy of Okay, 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 you can find it at buymypoetry.com. That'll take you to my website that has a list of all the places that it's available, links to them. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, Apple Books. It's also available as an ebook on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, so you can get your digital download on if that's your thing. And I thank you very much for watching.